Hey y'all, welcome to my Royal Icing Valentine's transfer tutorial. This tutorial goes along with my Valentine's transfer sheets that are available on my website, busybeebakehouse.com. Before we get started, let's take a look at some of the things you'll need. You'll first need your printed Royal Icing transfer sheet. Then you'll also need one of the following, either a page protector, some parchment paper, wax paper, a cellophane sheet, or an acetate sheet. These are going to be placed over your transfer sheet. You're next going to need some royal icing, and for this tutorial I'll be using an outline and a flood consistency icing in multiple different colors. And finally, you'll need a scribe tool or a toothpick. All right, let's get started. So here I have my printed transfer sheet, and I'm going to be using a page protector to put my transfer sheet in. I like to use a page protector because once I put my sheet in there, it's not gonna move. So if I accidentally bump my sheet while I'm working, I don't have to try and realign it. It's gonna be together the entire time. But again, you can use wax paper, parchment paper, or anything that I listed in the supplies. I prefer to work from the top of the transfer sheet to the bottom. That way my wrist doesn't smudge any of the icing as I'm working. The first thing that I'm going to do is outline each one of my hearts using my detail or outline consistency icing. In real life, I'm moving nice and slow, but for this video, I'm going to speed it up just a little bit. You'll also notice that I'm working in small sections, so I outline a few hearts and then I go back and I fill them in with my flood consistency icing. This way, my outline is going to blend into my flood for a more seamless transfer. Now that I've got that little section done, I'm going to move on to the next section. Another way to do the hearts, especially the little bitty ones, is to use a hybrid consistency icing and do 2 teardrop shapes that come to a point at the bottom of the heart. Then you just use your scribe tool to smooth it out. This is a great way to make quick hearts, especially if you're having to make a whole lot of them. They're not going to be as crisp as they would be if you outlined first, but it's still a really fast and easy way to make a heart. For my larger hearts, I am going to do a little bit of wet on wet. So I'm going to outline first, and then I'm going to fill them in with my flood consistency white. And then for the first 3 hearts, I'm going to do some different colored dots using a flood consistency icing in all the different colors. And then for the last 4 hearts, I'll do the same thing, but I'm going to do stripes. So again, using flood consistency for all the different colors. Now that I'm done with my hearts, I'm going to move on to my love letters. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to outline all of the lines using my outline or detail consistency white icing. I'm going to start by filling in the outer 2 triangles with my white flood consistency icing. You'll notice that I'm putting most of the icing in the center of the triangle. I'm not actually dragging the icing to the corners. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use my scribe tool to gently move the icing into the corner. That's going to give me a much sharper and cleaner flood. I want to give those sections that I just flooded a little bit of time to crust over or dry on the top. So I'm going to move down to my X's and start by outlining my X's. You may have noticed that I'm not working in sections right here, and that's because I really want to give the outline for my X a little bit of extra time to dry. That way my X looks like an X and not just a glob of icing. And now I'm going to outline and flood my O's. Now that I'm done with my O's, I'm going to move back up to my letter, and I'm going to flood in the bottom section of my letter. Again, not going to the corners. I'm going to use my scribe tool to drag the icing to the corners instead. All right, now let's move on down to our roses. Now, I love these little roses because they're so quick and easy, but they are really cute and whimsy. So what I'm doing is I'm using my outline consistency icing to just put a big old glob of icing right onto that circle, and then I'm smoothing it out using my scribe tool. As I was working, I started to notice that the second to last O was starting to look more like an oval and not an O. But no worries, that's a very easy fix. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a boo-boo stick. So this is just a flat little scraping tool. You could also use a butter knife. You could even try to use like a toothpick. But I'm just going to lightly scrape off that O using my boo-boo stick. And then I'm just going to re-outline and flood. And now that that's done, it's back to my little flowers. So again, using outline consistency icing here. I'm going to give my dots a little time to crust over, and while they're doing that, I'm going to move on down to my lips. I'm just going to first start by outlining my lips using my outline or detail consistency icing. Now, just like I did with my love letter, I'm not going to put that icing all the way into those points. Instead, I'll use my scribe tool to gently drag it into the corners. And now I'm going to add just a cute little highlight here on the top of my lip. I'm doing just a little line with a dot underneath. Once I'm done with my upper lips, I'm going to let those crust over. And in the meantime, I'm going to move back and finish up my love letter. So I'm going to flood in the last section of my love letter. Again, not putting that icing into the corner, but instead using my scribe tool to drag it to the edge. Now that that's flooded in, let's move back down to our little swirly roses. So I'm going to be using my outline consistency icing, and all I'm going to do is create a nice big swirl on top of my dot. So I'm going to start from the outside and then swirl in. And by this point, my upper lip has nicely crusted over, so I can go ahead and add the bottom lip. And again, putting the icing in the center and using my scribe tool to drag it to the corners. And now I'm going to add my final touch to my love letter, which is just a cute little heart right in the center of each letter. Now let's move over to our love letter transfer sheet. For the wax seal, I'm going to be using some cornstarch and a ball fondant tool. This is not something you have to do. This is just the way that I made my indented center of my wax seal. I've already showed you how to do the letters, so I'm going to skip the letters and I'm going to move on down the page to the stamps. For the first 2 rows of stamps, I am going to just outline the center of the stamp and then add dots around the edge. I'm adding a dot on each corner and then 3 dots on each side. I could outline each one of those itty bitty notches, but that's gonna take a lot of time. So instead, I'm gonna do the dots. It looks just as cute, but it's a whole lot faster. When I get to my largest stamps, I am actually going to outline each one of those little notches and then fill it in with my flood consistency icing. I'll then use my scribe tool to smooth it out and drag the flood consistency into the outline. Now that I've got the outer edge of all of my stamps done, I'm going to go back in with my white flood consistency icing and fill in the top 2 rows of stamps. My bottom row of stamps is still drying and crusting over, so I'm going to skip that one and move on down to my wax seals. I'm using an outline consistency icing, and basically I'm just going to fill in the general shape of the wax seal. I'm not going to smooth it out with my scribe tool or anything. We're going to come in and make it indent later, so there's no need to smooth it out right now. I'm going to give those just a little time to crust over while I flood in the center of my large stamps. Now let's make the center of our wax seals. So I'm using a ball tool. This is usually used for fondant. And I'm just going to dip it into my cornstarch and then lightly press it into the center of each one of my wax seals. The key here is to make sure you have plenty of cornstarch on your tool that you're using. That way it doesn't stick to the icing. If you don't have a ball tool, you can use the backside of a paintbrush or the backside of a scribe tool that's nice and clean. Now I'm just going to repeat the same process for the last 2 rows of wax seals. Now, when these are completely dry, all I have to do is take a fluffy brush and brush off any of the excess cornstarch. So you're not going to see that when those dry. For the second row of seals, I'm still using that ball tool to create the indent, but for the last row, I needed something a little bit bigger. I actually cleaned one of my food coloring bottles really well, and then I dipped it into the cornstarch and pressed the cap right into the center of each seal, and it gave me a nice, perfect little circle. And now my stamps have had plenty of time to crust over, so I'm going to go ahead and add my final details. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take my outline consistency icing and I'm just going to outline that center square just to make it a little bit cleaner and sharper. And then I'm going to take my navy outline consistency icing and add just a cute little heart to the center of each one of my stamps. Now let's take a closer look at our flower transfer sheet. I've already taught you how to do the swirl rows. This is just in some different sizes here, so I'm going to keep this sped up the entire time, but for this sheet, I'm going to start by making all of my dots first. When I get to the flowers that have the leaves, I'm going to do the leaves first. For these smaller roses that have leaves, I'm doing a teardrop shape for each one of the leaves. So I'm squeezing and dragging to the tip of each leaf. For the larger flowers with leaves, I'm going to outline the leaves and then fill them in with a flood consistency. Now let's move to the roses at the bottom. So these are going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to be outlining and then filling them in with a flood. Instead, I'm going to be using outline consistency the entire time and doing a little bit of pressure piping. I'm first going to fill in the center of my rose. So I'm just following that general shape of the flower, and I'm squeezing hard right in the center and then dragging it towards the edge. I'm kind of making a comma shape. Now I'm going to do the petal that comes into the center. So that is the top left petal. And again, I'm pressure piping. So I'm going to start squeezing and then I'm going to release pressure and drag it towards the center. Again, making kind of a comma shape. Now I'm going to do the bottom petal, and this one kind of looks like it's got two bumps. So I'm going to squeeze, release pressure, and squeeze again to really fill in that entire petal. And now I'm just going to fill in the outer two petals, and it's just like a little U shape on each side, or like a little half circle. So I start squeezing really softly, I add more pressure towards the center, and then I release pressure towards the end. Now those are done. They are very quick and easy. So let's move back up to our flowers that have the leaves. Now we're just going to add the little dot for the rose for each one of those flowers. As I've been moving down this page, I've been cutting a larger hole as I go down, especially for these really big flowers. So I need a smaller hole again when I go back to do my swirl. So how do I do that? It's really, really easy. All you have to do is take your old piping bag that's got the big hole in the bottom already and slide it into another tipless piping bag, and now just cut yourself a smaller hole. And now to finish this page, all I need to do is put the swirls on all of my little flowers. All right, guys, and that is it for this Valentine's transfer sheet tutorial. I'll be having a tutorial coming out very soon about the chocolate candy transfer sheet that is also available on my website. So be sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel and following me on Instagram so you can be notified when that comes out. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you have a lot of fun with these transfer sheets. Switch it up, change the colors, and just make it your own. If you have any questions, you can message me on Instagram at busybee.bakehouse, or you can send me an email at busybeebakehouse@gmail.com. And until next time, happy cooking!